So this panel's it's sort of about NFTs, but I wanted to do something a little more general than that. I think there's some interesting things happening in decentralized gaming, blockchain-based gaming, and there's some overlap there with NFTs. And so we titled it Luxury, Leisure, and Culture, I believe. Okay, so we have three distinguished panelists. So first, we have Blake Finucane, who's Chief Strategy Officer at Pluto Digital. She also has a master's from UBC, which I believe is the first sort of graduate dissertation on crypto art. And this was sort of before NFTs were a thing. Tamara Goddard is the CEO of For Our Future Indigenous Economics. She also has a master's degree in Indigenous Business and Leadership from SFU. And we have Will Robinson, who's a core contributor at Alliance DAO. And he has a PhD in game design from Concordia University. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll allow each of the speakers to introduce themselves and also give opening statements. I also prepared a sort of primer on NFTs. The very first keynote of this session was given by Ari Jules, who talked all about NFTs. So that was for those who saw it. I'm just going to repeat things that you've already seen, but I'll try and give it a little faster than he did. So I'm going to go first, then I'll ask Tamara to go second because I'm going to play your video for you, and then maybe we'll go Blake and then Will, and then we'll open it up for question and answers. So. I have a lot of videos or something. It's taking a while. Okay, so I'm a security person, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the risks of NFTs, but I'm going to just try and define them, and then hopefully that will make the other panelists a little more relaxed, that they don't have to go through the technical details of what an NFT is. So generally, when we talk about tokens on blockchain, we think about fungible tokens, which is kind of like fungible money. So if I have two $20 bills, it doesn't matter which one I give you, they're the same. A non-fungible item is going to be unique. Unique could be like literally one of a kind, or it could be like one in a limited series. Now, there's also this concept of ownership. I'm not going to be the authority on what that means. That's something I want to ask the panelists about. But just to give you a hint, if you think of say your favorite song, you probably stream it nowadays. You might have an MP3 of it. You can listen to it anytime, but you don't really own it, right? The artist or the record label is going to own that particular song. And so the idea of NFTs is to try and tokenize this idea of ownership, whatever that means. And then the T in NFT means it's a token, which basically means that there's very low friction in terms of your ability to create it, mint it, trade it. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't have to identify yourself. You can do it 24/7, just like sending an email. And so that's part of the appeal, I think, of NFTs as well. So NFTs could look like generative art, algorithmically generated art. You could have real art. So this is a picture by Nelson Mandela that someone, his kids had put online. You could have music artists. So this is one from an artist that I like that actually comes with some perks. So they're like, hey, you can buy this NFT. You can come to my concert for the next 3 years for free. And there's some other things that if you read them, could be like collectibles. So this is like a project that allows you to collect sports soccer players cards. One I'll use just as a kind of running example. So I read about this in the New York Times, and the idea was that in this project they were going to go buy a real piece of art at Christie's, which is this picture or painting by Banksy, the graffiti artist. And because it's very expensive, it costs tens of millions of dollars. I forget exactly how much. They thought they would split it into 10,000 pieces. And so what you could do is you could own a particular coordinate on the graphic itself. So let me just fly. So if you look at the blue crosshairs, for example, that's like one coordinate, and very small at the bottom on the right-hand side, it says 4, 1, 2, 3. And you can see like a little white square, almost entirely white with like kind of a black grip. So that's the particle, for example, that you might be given if you buy into this. Okay, so really quickly, I don't have to belabor this point, but I'll just outline some of the risks. So the risks are going to have to do with who's authoritative over the NFT, how you distribute it. We see fraud in this market, and there's some also issues with the marketplaces that sell them. So the first question is, what did you really buy? So what you bought is essentially a kind of database entry that says, hey, there's this token. It has a unique identity on the blockchain, and this address is the owner of that particular token. If you dereference the token and dig in a bit, you'll see like a kind of blob from a database that's going to have lots of information about the token itself. So you might have the actual image itself as a picture. Another important thing is that there's going to be some terms and services that are applied. So the terms and services for that Banksy one, for example, look like this. It's long, it's complicated. If you read it closely, you realize that in the case of this project, so I'm not speaking for all projects, but in this case, you acknowledge and agree that particles are made available for entertainment and internal non-commercial purposes. 99.9% of the title remains with the foundation that bought the artwork, and you can continue through it. Okay, so there's some risks around, somebody has to digitize this art. Do you trust them? How do you make sure that they're only issuing NFTs on one chain and not on other chains? Do they actually have the legal rights? There was another Banksy project where they just made up the fact that they bought a painting and started selling NFTs. You might worry about too, if the art itself isn't on the blockchain, just a link to it, is that link going to still be around in a couple of years? So ultimately you trust the issuer, but that's not so bad. I mean, with art, you also trust the issuer, right? You trust the artist that when they write, 15 out of 50, that they're going to honor that, and they're not going to create new, more than 50 paintings. And NFTs are still interesting because you still have the permissionless and trustless nature of being able to issue them. It's super, almost no friction. You can get NFTs, in 5 minutes, you can decide you want to own one, and it can be in your wallet in 5 minutes. There's some distribution issues. So one of them, this was just interesting for that exact Banksy thing. Essentially what happens is what they want to do is they want to take your money and then give you a random particle. So you don't know what particle you're buying ahead of time. And if you look at the painting, you know that like 90% or 95% of it are just white squares. And so everyone wants like one of the flower particles that are super rare, and nobody wants like just the white square. Now, the problem with the transaction is you also want it to be atomic. Okay, so you don't want to give the money and then maybe the server goes down and you don't get your particle. So what they did instead is they gave you a transaction and they asked you to sign it. And baked into the transaction is the fact that you're going to pay them. But it also has to, by definition, include which particle you're about to get. Okay, it might be obfuscated, but it is in there somewhere. And so in this case, you could actually just go look at the transaction. And this is what MetaMask would show you, for example, and you could see it as a parameter, basically pull it out, and then you could just see what particle you're about to get, and then you could cancel the transaction and just reload the page, and then you would get a new random particle. Now, I never exploited this myself. I just want to make that clear. And they quickly, I think someone else did, because I got thinking about this problem because they announced that they had an issue around this, and they made it so that if you refresh the page like 2 or 3 times, then they would just not sell it to you at your address. But you could create new addresses in order to defeat that. There's lots of fraud in the NFT. So we see pump and dumps, similar with tokens. There was a recent example, I think last week, of insider trading where someone who worked at OpenSea, which is the biggest market, they knew which projects were going to be featured. They bought them. And then when they were featured, they sold them. And they were actually arrested and charged. There's wash trading where people sell to themselves to make it look like their NFTs are popular and selling for a lot of money when they're really just moving around their own accounts. Phishing as well is another problem. So you can see a little video here of the real particle website and what it looks like. It's at particlecollection.com, and someone threw up a fake website called particlecollection.art, which will show up in a second. And you'll see that it looks indistinguishable almost from the real site. So it's very easy for you to just copy and paste HTML code from one site, make a phishing site that looks almost the same. The URL is almost the same. It's just .art as opposed to .com. And when you go here, they're like, hey, we have this like private sale and there's a limited supply. And in order to entice you to buy really quickly, there's these like little pop-ups that show that other people are buying them. And the amount that are available is like going down really quickly. So you get scared and it tries to rush you into like buying one of these particles before they all sell out. So it was a pretty clever piece of work, but it was unfortunately phishing. And I'm sure if you put your address in or you signed one of their transactions, not only would they sell you a fake token, there's ways to make malicious transactions that could steal all the tokens that are in your wallet. There's also front-end vulnerabilities. So a lot of people will use a website like OpenSea. OpenSea, what you can do at the contract level and what you can do at the website level are not always one-to-one. So there were some issues where the website wasn't showing you, for example, past approvals that you've made and things like that. And so people who bypassed the website and just called into Ethereum, into the OpenSea contracts themselves, were able to sort of sidestep things that shouldn't have happened. We know from other security research that users click through things without really, understanding them. So that's a particular risk as well. Okay, so that's hopefully an introduction to it. And like I say, I'm on the security side, so that's why I zeroed in on sort of the risks. But the other panelists will talk a bit about some of the things that you can do with NFTs. So I'm going to turn it over to Tamara if you're there, but I see your video's off. If you're not, we can skip you and come back. I see that you are there. If you want to unmute. And we can hear you?
Yes, you can hear me.
Yes,
check.
I can. Okay, so do you want me to, I'm going to show your video and then I'm going to show your slides? Is
100%.
that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So let's start with the video. And this does have sound, right?
It does, yes.
Okay, so just give me 1 sec. I'm going to, okay. So this sound should work. If it doesn't, just holler. All right, I'm going to get your slides going, but if you want to get started while I transition to it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. It's lovely to be here. I'm going to tell you a story today. I'm the CEO for our Future Indigenous Economics with a background. So two backgrounds I want to tell you about. One is my mom is Dr. Val Napoleon, who is a professor of Indigenous law. Myself, I went into Indigenous business and leadership and began to understand a lot influenced by her work, Indigenous economics. So For Our Future actually did 3 national papers with international scope on the impact of Web3 on Indigenous peoples, and that is in the area of business. So we actually explored blockchain's use with modern day treaties, in the procurement cycle, smart contracting, and then we also explored the ability of embedding those treaties and cultural knowledge, cultural teachings into the blockchain, and how would we do that? So we presented that nationally, and the pace of bureaucracy moves slowly. So they're still reviewing that. So I had told my research assistant, we're gonna do this, but in order to capture the attention and really explore the possibilities, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a project so that in our own way as Indigenous people, we can storytell this. This happened during the pandemic, and this was during a time when Indigenous communities were struggling extremely financially. And although we did successfully raise $3 million in distribute, it wasn't enough. We also had inner city youth that really needed a positive way moving forward. And we know that when we connect youth and people to culture, we all sort of begin to innovate together. Indigenous people are creative. We wanted to get into this space and know more about it than just looking and writing a paper. So what we sought to do was to represent Indigenous art in its true form, which is an oral culture in a digital environment. Okay, let's go. Next slide. Okay, so the purpose of this is that we were struggling with our own finances, having raised, $3 million for Indigenous communities. Funding got further and further and further apart. For Our Future, Indigenous economics started to have layoffs. We wound up carrying a 6-figure accounts receivable. So this was true innovation. This is David Fierro. He's our drum maker and also a shareholder. And there's the drums. You can see them behind me. But the idea of this project was to support three other mandates of 3 other corporations that are a part of this. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I already mentioned this, but it's a campaign that is committed to being a proof of concept. I love applied research. As a researcher, I love to do things and study it along the way. So we are actually launching into a series of beautiful white papers funded by this awesome project where we don't have any strings attached to anything. And we'll begin to publish those between August and October. Okay, next slide. Oh, we've seen that. Oh, it's actually going. Okay, here's the corporations. So For Our Future, For Our Future was formed to implement Indigenous economics. Indigenous people, we've always been a decentralized people with common law structures. I think that the only other thing that's as oppressed as sort of the Indigenous economic perspective is green technology. Because as Indigenous people and negotiators for major projects, we found that we were not able to bring in centralized technology for things like an Indigenous community to own and operate their own vertical greenhouse system to feed the community, or water systems where they could purchase it themselves, own it themselves, and distribute that water, which would be sustainable and less costly and also create jobs. So that's sort of how we think as Indigenous, but there's a disparity between what we're applying for with the government and the strings attached to the funding that we get that does not quite allow us to get to that independent sovereign place. Ancestral Link is one, he teaches culture. And the other problem and issue we have with the cultural teachings is we can't sell eagle feathers. In fact, we're not allowed to sell these drums. We're only allowed to gift them to people in a cultural sharing way. If you were to value them, they're between $4,000 to $30,000, depending on the size and complexity of the drum, but we're only allowed to sell them through museums or to fundraise for our people. So we do have traditional protocol attached to this project, along with elders and elders guiding our process and what we are allowed to share. Back to the Fire is an Indigenous film documentary series, again, So important these things get funded. Chief Gibby Jacob of the Squamish Nation wishes to do a film across Canada with folks like Sophie Pierre, people like my mother, who really stood up during the most difficult time in colonization, where they were experiencing really hard stuff. But they stood up and they created the future, the present moment that we have today. And so all of my education, all of the investments, all of the youth that we have with us, we have opportunity because our elders stood up. We want to honor them in a documentary series whereby they can teach why it's important to maintain knowledge of traditional Indigenous leadership teachings. And here to help is the Mycelium. It's a communications application that keeps communities connected with education and with each other as they innovate. So next slide. Okay, this is just our economics model and not justice. This has actually been used as a visual in about $60 billion worth of negotiations by our team. So we didn't come at this lightly, but what we do is share this economic model, and we are implementing it in Web3 now. And so food security, power, water, housing, securities is the land securities that we look at as Indigenous people. And then aspects of people is our culture. Capacity is local market, careers, and education. And that is how we look at 7 generations in the future and understand 7 generations in the past. Next slide. Okay, just want to, because of the group here, just wanted to sort of show how this sort of organically develops, because we don't have quarters in a sense here. What we are doing is actually implementing Indigenous economics to tokenomics and in the Web3 environment. It's not an easy task, but we are absolutely loving it. But we've got core, which is coming right into our team because we are all Indigenous people, all with our own important projects to do. Direct is the input where we would be staking monies and saving those monies in order to invest in lands to be able to come up with a new economic model to build a green tech campus whereby Indigenous people can come, stay, view, learn, and take home green technologies for their community, and that we're also able to provide the funding through tier 1 financiers, not just Web3. Indirect is how we are educating in smart contracts to bring Indigenous peoples into the Web3 in a way that allows them to innovate. Okay, let's go. Next slide. I wouldn't have time, this would take a whole hour, but just because we're an economics company, this is a very complex, but not too complex for our team because we love this stuff, of how we are utilizing funds that are raised to maximize those funds so they don't just get spent without growing value. These values that you see, they are both in real life and in Web3. And a lot of this has to do with we have an accounting firm that's assisting us and a legal firm that's assisting us to draw down funds, account for those funds, budget those funds, and set up the structures you all have been previously talking about. But we will do that through an Indigenous lens to ensure complete transparency. We're so transparent, our entire code and our entire budget is viewed by our whole team. We do that because we are always training, and because we don't want people to think because a business makes a lot of money, you take all of that money. The idea of a business is to not kill the golden goose. So we teach our young people that, and then we teach them this is therefore how much can be taken. And we make those decisions as consensus. It's the way that we train our youth. Next slide. So again, this could go on for a while, so I'll just run through it quickly, but there are strategies to increase NFTs. Our NFT holders are our investors. We consider them citizens and community members. We are actually, developing a lot of user-friendly interfaces that allow applications where they can unlock with a key. With their NFT becomes a raffle ticket and a key to be able to unlock what's called utilities. And when you unlock those utilities, it gives you as the NFT holder a gamified way of making money. And so as Indigenous peoples, we grow together and we gift in order to show wealth. So we're actually implementing an Indigenous economics platform in order to grow the value of the NFT in a very secure and very planned, very methodical way, and in order to teach our NFT holders how to do that. There's a complete user-friendly interface that we're calling IndigiDApp, decentralized application, where they can use their key, get in there and see all of the gifts, benefits, monies that they have access to. One of those things is an Indigenous small batch marketplace, where you'd be able to access products that nobody else can find from 600 communities across Canada. And the financial mechanisms, this is important perhaps for this group. We're working with tier 1 financiers and banks to be able to leverage the funds. So we're leveraging the funds in that way. We're also providing seed monies to have a proposal writing team, and we train our team to do that. So that's another way that we leverage. We leverage into creating a foundation whereby we would spend $150,000 in order to raise $5–10 million for grant funds. Investor finance is who we're working with to leverage into real world fiat currency. And then partners. We don't expect to do this all ourselves. And as we've been doing partnerships for many years, we are leveraging this project to move there. So next slide.
I'll just give you a 1 minute warning if you can.
No problem. I think that's the main.
Oh, that's it. Anyways.
These are just pictures. I wanted to show the NFTs. That's the physical drum you saw on the thing. This is what the NFTs look like. It is a generative collection. And I think the last slides are just pictures, guys. Yeah. So we're already, it's called minting. We're in a minting process now. So this is sort of how it looks.
Great,
and I
great.
think the last slide is just Chief Gibby Jacob.
Okay, perfect.
But it's fine. You've seen all these.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll come back to you for question and answer too. Blake, do you want to go ahead with an opening statement?
Sure. Yeah. And it's just, you just said kind of 5 minutes, go through kind of my background or whatever.
Yeah, your background and what you find interesting in the space.
Cool. Yeah. So, hi everyone. I'm excited to be back in academic world for a little bit. I feel so far away from it these days. So, and I'm excited to be with the other amazing panelists. So, as Jeremy said, so I graduated in 2018 with my MA in art history. I published at that time what was like the first academic thesis on crypto art. It wasn't very well received from most people, as no one really understood what crypto art was then. I mean, I don't think I really did either. The reason that I was so drawn into it at that time was I really thought that just like smart contract implementation actually solved questions that artists had been asking around remuneration and really protecting themselves. And these were questions that artists had kind of been asking for 100 years. So I was like, oh my gosh, this actually solves a lot of stuff. Yes, there are issues, as kind of Jeremy pointed out in his introduction, around, protecting yourself from fraud, from, getting your assets stolen. But I really thought, oh my gosh, this is something I really want to write about. There wasn't really any opportunity that I saw to work in the space at that point. I couldn't have imagined that anything could have gotten as big as it has, but here we are. So just to kind of fast forward, what happened is I did what obviously every art historian does, and I started working in investment banking on the classic art history to investment banking transition. So I did that because it was a bear market in 2018 when I graduated. Like no one really knew. I mean, Ethereum hit $80. So it was a really intense time to kind of, I didn't have the confidence really to understand how I could work full-time in crypto at that point, particularly coming from not only an academic background, but an art history background. So about a year and a half ago, I lectured at different universities about crypto art. I was an investor myself, but in terms of actually making a sustainable career, I didn't really understand how. And then about a year and a half ago, I got a call from a company in the UK called Pluto Digital to run their NFT fund. Obviously at that time, this was in February, January, nothing at that point. No one really had a background in NFTs because they were so new. And the CEO of the fund phoned me and said, hey, you're really one of the only people I know that have been kind of studying this for a really long time. Do you want to kind of buy stuff for us? And I said, yes, absolutely. So I started running an NFT fund about a year and a half ago. And then about a year ago, I started running the VC fund as well. So we do classic kind of crypto venture investing. And really, when it comes to my what I do, I consider myself, maybe it's a bad word in the context of academia a lot of times, but I do consider myself an investor before anything else, a participant in the space. I think to be really understanding what's going on in crypto, whether that's from a gaming perspective, just like a general NFT perspective, from a DeFi perspective, whatever it is, you have to be participating in these protocols to really get it, to really understand the issues, to really understand the upside. So I consider myself, an investor and a participant first and foremost in the space now. So I'm very, very close to it. And in terms of kind of what I think is most exciting right now, I'm super interested to hear what Will has to say. I know that he's a gaming expert, but I think kind of really looking at economic systems within games and playing around with how to create, if there's such things, sustainable systems within games is really interesting to me. My company is actually building a game at the moment. So I'm really like a Web3 crypto game. So I'm really, really in the weeds around figuring out what works and what doesn't on that side of things, and world building from a crypto perspective, and how that can really transition outside of the quote unquote crypto industry and bring normal gamers in. I know this is a very big conversation that kind of everyone's having within the crypto world, how to bring non-crypto people in and actually play games that people really want to play outside of from an economic kind of perspective. So I think the economic systems are fascinating, but really in general, just the opportunity to enter a system that is so new and developing and be able to come and become an expert or a very, very valuable participant within the ecosystem very, very quickly, I think is very, very exciting. So that's what I'll say.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Will?
Hey, give me a second.
You're good. You're good. If you want to share your screens, I have an old copy of your slides too, as a backup.
So do you see just my face and not my speaker notes?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So just a quick refresher, everybody. I have a PhD in video game design at Concordia University, where Jeremy works, but not where I met him. I met him at my first job in crypto in 2018 when I was doing financial audit of cryptocurrency. I was hired to help Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton start auditing clients internationally and help market that. Eventually, they fired everybody who knew more than me, and I became the domain expert, supported in large part by Jeremy. A year ago, I left to join Alliance DAO. It's a community of Web3 builders who are sort of like in the elite echelons. We raised $50 million from the founders of most major protocols. And I spend most of my time mentoring people in our accelerator who are basically in this transitional phase from not being part of our community to being part of our community. So we take 10 weeks to onboard new members in a kind of extensive initiation that ends in a demo day, where we present to about 1,000 VCs, similar to Y Combinator, if you know how that works. So you can follow me on Twitter at DangerWillRobin, and here's how I think about games and crypto. I think about what are the major differences between Web 2 and Web 3 and how these impact games. So the keywords I have here are interoperable, composable, permissionless, and uncensorable, and how those sort of intersect. And I'm going to go swiftly so that we can get to the chatting and the conversation, because I didn't prepare any slides on economics of games, but I'm also deeply involved in that, as I am the primary advisor to Stepan and an advisor to Axie, both of whom have had catastrophic failures of their economies. So interoperable tokens are a good example of these, such as NFTs. Smart contracts can use mappings to connect addresses and imbalances. So here's an example. This is Zapper. It's a company in Montreal, and it can track all of your holdings in crypto based on an address you give it. And that's quite convenient as a use case. And this is what is going to be useful in games. Here's an example where interoperability works with governance. So Snapshot can tally your votes based on how many tokens you hold of a particular type, or whether you hold an NFT or not. Friends with benefits will let you into their Discord if you hold the correct number of tokens, right? So here the database of the chain is used in many different applications. Axie Infinity as a game lets you hold NFTs in your wallet and play the game after you connect your Web2 game account with your sort of on-chain identity. It's interesting to note that no part of Axie Infinity, the game, the largest crypto game in the world, takes place on-chain. The only relevant piece of information that is on-chain is how many tokens you own and how many NFTs you own, and that these are transferable between players. Every time you win more tokens in the game, there's a manual centralized edit that is made to your account on-chain. So we're not talking about permissionlessness in the case of Axie, but that is composability and permissionlessness are two things I find really important. This is the idea that smart contracts which follow standards end up being like these Lego blocks that can be built on top of each other. A good example is how ERC20 token contracts can be used in Uniswap. So Uniswap will let you trade some ETH for any other arbitrary asset. And it does that because the token contracts for wrapped Ethereum and for Uniswap or for USDC all follow normal standards that let you build and mix and match with them. OpenSea, which is like an auction house for NFTs, which was mentioned earlier, right, lets you collect a variety of NFTs and trade and buy with them because they follow standards. And so this is like a Web2 app building on top of tokens, but that Web2 app actually has a whole infrastructure of smart contracts. When I think about games, though, we're really at the cutting edge when we start thinking about composability and permissionlessness. I think there are only about 20 people in the world who are worrying about this, and I'm one of them. But I do think it's where the space is going. So this is my favorite Web3 game called Dark Forest. It is very hard to play, very hard to get into, meant for nerds and for nerd sniping. But I founded the largest guild that plays Dark Forest called Dark Forest DAO. And in this game, we built a smart contract that allowed players to permissionlessly contribute their points to a single smart contract player. So rather than playing the game as an individual, you could play the game as a horde of people who had never met each other before. And why that is useful is because the first place prize up till the 63rd place prize in this game rewards people with an NFT that can be valuable. And it can be really hard to get in the top 63 slots because there are thousands of players and you need to be very smart and very active. And so these players banded together and came 33rd and then split their winnings, all programmatically using on-chain smart contracts. And that's something that we don't think has ever happened in any game where players were able to permissionlessly accumulate resources for pooling their efforts together. The other piece is related to uncensorability. So how do games make use of the fact that no one can stop the logic that they run on? And this is, of course, in the case of games that are on-chain. Maybe I should have mentioned this with Dark Forest, but all of the game logic is on-chain, unlike Axie Infinity. So that means it's client agnostic. You can rebuild the game with any visuals you like, with any interface you like. You can, and it doesn't really matter. And so when you do that, those things become uncensorable, meaning no one can stop those games. Who would want to stop a game? It's kind of hard to think through, but some benefits are such that the designers of the games themselves can't win them on their own. So like if a game's prize is scarce, only people who actually play the game, not the game makers, can print more of the scarce resources. This is a problem with Axie Infinity, for instance. You have to trust the main builders of the game that they will not print more resources as they need them or want them for themselves. But also, if it's uncensorable, that usually means that it's immutable and unchanging code. And so if you build on it, it won't change. so you can reliably start putting your Legos together and not worry that someone will alter a Lego at a lower level and then collapse your tower. So here the threat isn't really from some government entity. It's more from owners at different levels. So because of uncensorability, we have things like Tornado Cash, which let people transfer tokens and hide their identities. We have fractionalization tools that can turn non-fungible tokens into fungible tokens and thus securities, and thus change their reporting nature and their KYC nature. But like no regulators get to touch that or hang out with that because it's uncensorable and on-chain. But also, and this is my last slide, games get to be played by non-players in this world of on-chain, permissionless, composable games. And this is something that game designers have not been used to in the past. So if anybody can touch the smart contract because it's uncensorable and permissionless, then the games can be botted, hacked, or exploited. And a good example is Skyweaver. It's a card game that's played on-chain, not on-chain per se, but partially on-chain. And when players play the game, they often encounter bots who are playing to win prizes. And those robots are there just to sort of grind out rewards that the game makers have offered as incentives, because that's a unique feature that game makers can have with crypto games, is that they can pay players to play. And so when bots start farming them, the Web 2.5 games like Skyweaver come up with ways to ban them. Like, oh, if you're particularly bad at the game, you can't win prizes. So then the bot's AIs upgrade. And so then like, okay, well, not just if you're particularly bad, but if you don't emote, like if you don't use our emojis in our game and you fail to like express humanity, well, then we'll ban you and not give you prizes. But then like give it a week and the robots emote better than humans do. And so today, actually, no one knows the difference between a bot and a human playing Skyweaver because the AIs have been incentivized to develop, to pass Turing tests, essentially. And this problem is only exacerbated in games like Dark Forest, where winning something like this means building oodles of scripts, reprogramming GPUs to hash at new rates they've never seen before, rewriting clients to remove lines of code that were like interfering with how quickly you could play, and banding together random strangers to coordinate attacks, and also even start playing at the consensus level with bribing miners not to include opponents' transactions in the chain so that you can beat them. So the nature of on-chain gaming is getting quite interesting and hairy, and so I'm up for exploring all of that, and also any economic stuff you want to talk about. It's basically what I eat, live, breathe, dream, so happy to chat.
All right, thanks. So to the audience, if you have questions for the panelists, please drop them in the chat. While I wait for that, there's one common thread, I guess, maybe that all of you can sort of talk about. Comes out of Blake's remarks, where she mentioned both expanding like adoption of NFTs, but then it also got me thinking about usability as well. And so this isn't something new with NFTs. It's also something that we've had with blockchain all along with DeFi and things like that. So I'm curious about your comments or experiences with onboarding users, what it's like, what the roadblocks are that you see. Can we surmount those roadblocks? What can we do to try and expand the number of users? So just jump in. I'm not going to manage it.
Are you referring to, like, in terms of users, is that people in Web3 or people in crypto? Is there?
So more for NFTs. So for you, for example, I assume that I would have to install MetaMask or something like that to buy the art, and
we actually go. Yeah, we go right out. So we've been on CBC twice. Part of the fundraising for this is the Indigenous youth that work with us. So, for example, we had to give a workshop to a First Nation. They made rattles, bone rattles, sacred rattles that you cannot sell. So they made the rattles, and our youth team came in. They recorded the sound, digitized them, and we're creating them in NFT. So the Indigenous communities had a fun day making rattles, but now they're getting set up with a MetaMask wallet, yes, and just sort of coming through it in storytelling. So what that community now knows is NFTs are something they can tap into. In other cases, though, like we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on one nation, hooking them up with a digital classroom, drone training, film training, in order for them to get their tourism online. In another instance, the Squamish Nation hereditary chiefs are coming to record their language amalgamation agreement. And we were going to make that into an NFT, as well as use artificial intelligence language technology and develop that out. So we're, to be in this space is to innovate in this space, and we're well down our goals. We're also on CBC Unreserved, which goes into the households of all Indigenous people across Canada, and also doing a worldwide Indigenous NFT conference in Hawaii. So we're very, very active in the onboarding, but it's really just mentorship. Come in, make a rattle, know what you love as an Indigenous person. Our goal is to get people to innovate.
Okay, so mentorship, user education, those are two important things. Is there anything else, Will or Blake, that developers can do to try and ease the usability burdens?
Game developers are highly incentivized to try and ease usage. So there are a couple solutions. One is custodial wallets. So the game developer will actually hold your private key for you. You'll have an NFT. You'll be able to trigger transactions. One day you might decide to withdraw and take custody yourself, but you might not even know for the first few hours, days, months that there is a private key that someone else is controlling. There's an Ethereum standard that was made by the people who built Horizon, and Skyweaver, the game I showed, where they use a smart contract that takes arbitrary messaging to trigger transactions so that their front-end client can do all kinds of things on chain without any kind of fancy MetaMask work. It's a sort of pseudo-custodial solution as well. So yeah, on the tech front, there are ways to sacrifice decentralization and censorship resistance to get people halfway through the door. And then when they want to go fully through the door, they can, because they're not critical for gamers, those two components.
Got it. Blake?
Yeah, I think what always keeps me grounded is I'm kind of always raising money, I guess. And so I deal with a lot on the public market side. So dealing with stockbrokers and trying to get them to set up MetaMask wallets is quite a performance. And kind of just the more that kind of communicating to different ranges of people and really understanding still the limitation of the tools and how, I think custodial wallets are an incredible solution just at this point. But I have noticed, as I'm thinking more through actually product building, that a lot of the ideas have not caught up to the infrastructure around onboarding and made it easy to actually play these games or participate in these products. But at the same time, the upside is often where the difficulty lies, in that it's your own, you own everything yourself. So it's kind of hard to manage both. I think too, for me, I'm the lead advisor of this DAO called Boys Club, and it's the joke is it's no boys allowed. So if you don't identify as a man, then you're certainly welcome into the club. And we really focus again on onboarding women and non-binary people to Web3. And I think the question then becomes really in that is onboarding to what? What are we actually onboarding you to? And what are our promises that we're making in that process of helping you set up a MetaMask wallet or helping you with a Coinbase account? And really, what does that mean? Because, if we're onboarding you to be like, oh my gosh, well, you can get 20% yield with Luna. It's amazing. You just throw your money in and then it'll work out perfectly. Well, you have to be very, very conscious what, like the term onboarding, I think, rigorously kind of understanding what that really means, because depending on what you're showing people and what you're promising them on the other side of the MetaMask wallet and the Trezor or whatever you're showing them, the implications can be really, really awful. And so being very conscious in that term, what's on the other side of onboarding? Is it gaming? Is it investing? Is it, trying to blow all your money on NFTs that you think are going to go up, but actually go down? Whatever it is, and be conscious not only on the onboarding, but on the other side of it too. Great.
Okay, I'm going to borrow a bit of time from the closing remarks. Hopefully that's okay, because we're just getting started. But okay, I want all of your help because I'm always asked, what do you actually own when you buy an NFT? That's like the first or second question that everyone answers, and I never know how to answer that myself. And it obviously is varied according to like what exactly the nature of the NFT is. But I'll just turn it over to you. What do you say when people ask you, what is it that you actually are owning if you own an NFT?
For us, you're coming into our community. So that's what people get. We have Chief Gibby Jacob and elders. So really it's a portal into Indigenous economy. And part of that is the trade systems that our people still have to date. So medicines, teas, small batch. Also the NFT I mentioned that we made for the Indigenous community that are sacred rattles would have the opportunity for purchase. In terms of the white paper and the value raising, we're sort of looking at we have about 3,000 people just within what's called a Discord community. So we all work together, and then also a DAO. So we raise the value of this NFT because your NFT becomes a key. And when you're able to have a user interface, that's the decentralized app, you can go onto your app at any time and begin to unlock value for that NFT. As to how to forecast that, that's deep thinking. We're raising money to do that research right now, and that includes secondary market sales. One of the views that we're taking, though, is a redefinition, and this is by research from being in the industry, is I seem to think, and it seems to be showing me, and just in a hypothesis at this point, people are redefining how they think about the monetary system. For Indigenous people, relationship is the bottom line, and access to trades is the bottom line. What people tend to come to us because they're worried about the future of the earth. We're not over-promising when we say if we can bring funds to Indigenous peoples to restore the earth and to build green tech, that's something that they are investing in, and how the earth's never going to go down in value. I always tell people, Indigenous people occupy 25% of the earth and take care of 85% of the earth's biodiversity. And we're connected internationally with Indigenous peoples engaging and innovating in this space at a rapid pace. So that seems to make our community happy. That's a niche, and it's redefining what monetary value, what value you place or how you view monetary value is shifting.
Got it. Blake, Will, can you help me answer the question?
Sometimes I tell people that you own the right to change the number on one line of a registry. That's about it, right? So people can ascribe any rights they want to having a number at that line. And that number is always a public key. And so when you change the rights to someone else to be able to change the rights to someone else, it's open-ended, right? There's nothing. Now, like in the more formalized version where we go into talk about how there's a URI, Universal Resource Index, whatever it is, that points to that, right? A content ID, where on IPFS, there is the hash of an art file or a JSON file, which itself has the hashes of art files, and that those are immutable. And so you can, if the contract itself doesn't have upgradability or an admin, then you can have theoretically social rights. But yeah, no, it's a mess, and there's no standards. So I don't think you can really guarantee anything.
Blake, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with both of those takes. I think a lot of times I would say with that ownership, oftentimes then you have the opportunity to sell and move and trade whatever that actual kind of token is, regardless of what it represents, which could be very abstract and problematic. The actual ownership is yours. So maybe it'll fall apart and at some point it won't represent anything, but you still actually own that token and the right to capture value, as abstract as it may be.
Okay, one last question. This is more for Will and Blake, maybe, but Tamara, if you have thoughts too. So you both work on, in the VC accelerator sort of space. So just give us a sense of like how many projects are coming in the front door that have some sort of NFT component to them. How many do you think the NFTs are like meaningful, or how much of it is just sort of, latching on to an idea that that has a lot of hype around it, but that maybe aren't using it in a meaningful way? If you can say that.
Yeah, sure. No. So look, I'll talk about this cohort just as an example. So we've got a team called, so we had 750 applicants for our cohort. We took in 24. Of those, some meaningful NFT projects. We have 3 analytics platforms that are all doing different things for providing data on market analytics regarding NFTs. So how much is this NFT worth right now to some effect, right? That's a big hot topic. To more infrastructure plays, like I would like to index all the NFTs as fast as I can and visualize them, like, and build to the metal, like just hyper speed on that, like high frequency NFT information. We have a company that is linking AI voice filters to NFTs so that you can have unique synthesized voices. So if you're an anonymous person and you want to have your own voice, you could have one. We have NFT projects for forgery detection, right? So if an image of an NFT is re-uploaded on a new contract, right, at a new or even the same contract is deployed with a new URI, same URI, right? And so there's lots of ways to mess around with NFT minting. So fraud detection companies. So maybe a third to half are related to NFTs right now.
Got it.
And I'd say, like, the kind of, I guess, representation of the previous bull market was everyone had a token. You know what I mean? Tokenize everything. Let's try to figure out how to monetize it. Just put a token on. It might not have any real use, but let's do that. So I think what I'm seeing, or what will begin to happen, is that a lot of the quality projects, when it comes to consumer facing, but also I think capturing different data sets or ways to communicate privately B2B, will incorporate NFTs in some way. I would say, in terms of like the best projects that I've invested in and that the fund's invested in, they've been NFT forward or centric. Whether that's on the gaming side, a project like Splinterlands, which has gone up and down in terms of how it's been executing, but super happy to support them. And they were a real OG in terms of incorporating NFTs into their gameplay. And then something like a company called ASM, Altered State Machine, which they're really working on capturing like AI data sets within, so you own all of your data that your AI bot has generated, how to really use that skillfully in game, and thinking through that. So I think a lot of the best investments for us have all been kind of NFT forward, and I think we'll be seeing more creative usage of NFTs than before, as the kind of token narrative shifts, and people will be looking to see how they can incorporate NFTs within kind of a more sustainable kind of closed economy, I think. So yeah,
our community is looking to launch an NFT for our membership.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
but it will be an SBT, like so soulbound or non.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting.
because we don't want members to trade their membership away. Like it's sort of,
Yeah.
it's another way of doing an allow list, I
Yeah.
would say. So see how that works.
Cool, cool. Okay, maybe one last question for Tamara. Do you have any sense of, so the users who buy your NFTs, how do they display them? Is it mainly on websites like Twitter profiles? Do they find a way to display it in their homes? Do you have a sense of that at all?
Certainly, yeah. Part of our connecting real objects, we actually give away these drums. We gift them to our communities along with a whole lot of other prizes. But if you go to the decentralized app, you can download print quality and then be having it on your wall. And we're exploring different uses of QR codes. The other thing too that's important with us is that we have a huge budget for production. So in a sense, like what you would be spending, we live stream it for 6 hours every Friday. And we have quite a crew that comes and watches that. So you're buying into culture, education, learning, production. And as we go on, it's all of our youth team that are working with professional film professionals to continue to create content, documentary series. We have an Indigenous sound repository. So the way we look at NFTs is we're creating an ecosystem that allows Indigenous peoples to have a different way to step into the digital environment with what they are bringing forward. And we already know that there's a fairly large market for that. So our value system is quite a bit different from most other NFTs out there. We have found some similar projects that we're working with.
Great, great. Okay, well, that's all we have time for. So I thank our panelists again for participating. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Ray, who's going to give the closing remarks for BTS this year.